Question. All right. So let's talk about 1865, and the Civil War is over, but Abraham Lincoln hasn't died yet. Okay. In order to talk about Southern losses, number one, we have to start with what the South had before the war, right? Antebellum to the war, if you will. This is one of those little graph things that farmers chew on if you don't want to focus. Okay, so Southerners, what did they have before the war? Slaves. Slaves. Okay. And why were there slaves, Carolyn?
Because they had a lot of land.
They had a lot of land. Why did they need land, Bill? To farm. What were they farming? Cotton. Okay. And what's the big deal about cotton? What does it bring to the farmers, Marcy?
It gives them money because of the clothes.
It gives them money. Okay, great. So the Southerners had this cotton. They had slavery. They had plantations. They had lots of money. And they even had this sense of honor. This is a ribbon. They had this sense of Southern honor. But after the war was over, they lost everything. One Southerner even said, all those Yankees have left us with is the right to hate them. Okay, so number one, Southern losses. The South has lost everything. Land, farms, their workforce, economy. Well, I guess they've still got their honor, except that they lost the war. Okay.
So honor went down the drain.
Honor pretty much went down the drain. That's fine. On the other hand, in the North, what's the main political party? Meredith? Republicans. What does it mean to be radical? Bridget? Who knows what it means to be radical? No? Okay, mean or extreme or kind of crazy. So not all the Republicans were radical, but some of them were. Does that make sense? Okay, so number two, this group of radical Republicans, they were very angry at the South. And they thought that the South had committed treason. They had seceded illegally, started this war for no reason. Hundreds and thousands of people had died. Money had been wasted, land had been burned, and now the South needed to pay for starting this war for no reason. Does that make sense?
Did the South start the war? Did they or no one knows because of the gunshot?
No one knows because of the gunshots. That's a good point. Okay? But the radical Republicans saw it like that. Oh yeah? What is it?
It means relating to or reflecting the fundamental nature of something far-fetching or thorough.
Far-fetching. Okay, sure. Extreme. Alright. Now, trying to keep the North and South together, trying to maintain the Union since day one. Who's the 16th president?
Abraham Lincoln.
Okay? So before he dies, right when the war was over, he comes up with this plan. It's going to be a plan for amnesty and reconstruction. Number three. Reconstruction is easy because that means rebuilding, right? He wants to rebuild the South. He needs to give them a new way of life, a new economy. Amnesty means peace. So in this plan, Abraham Lincoln wants to peacefully forgive the South, bring them back. They won't be punished, everything will be fine. Okay? You need to know that it's Abraham Lincoln's plan for peacefully rebuilding the South and bringing them back to the Union. Addie?
In the book it said it was like called the
10% plan? The 10% plan is part of this plan. You're not going to need to know that specifically. Okay? You do just need to know that Abraham Lincoln's plan was peaceful, Pretty fair. Okay? Now, who's Abraham Lincoln's vice president?
Allison.
Yes, remember he is elected in 1860 and then 1864. And in 1864 he gets a new vice president. Andrew Johnson, who was at first the vice president, but of course when Abraham Lincoln dies, becomes the 17th president. Right? Okay. Now, have we talked a little bit about Abraham Lincoln's team of rivals? Not really? Okay. It means that Abraham Lincoln believed in hiring people that were the best for their job, regardless of what political party they were. Okay? Okay? Okay. So even though Abraham Lincoln was what political party? Republican. His vice president was a Democrat. He was from Tennessee. He owned many slaves. He was very racist. That'll get important in a second. So Andrew Johnson becomes the 17th president. And he's a Democrat. What political party do you think makes up Congress at this time, Bridget?
Democratic Party.
Why?
Because President Obama is a Democrat. Both parties make
You
up
back
Congress.
then, not now.
Make up Congress. Okay.
Oh.
In 1866, what do you think?
I don't know.
Either both. Who voted in that election in 1864? The North. What political party was the North made up? Oh, Republicans. Okay, so the Congress is majority Republican. Okay, so that's not good. Now, meanwhile, Abraham Lincoln had this great plan for Reconstruction that he was going to split up the plantations, right, and sell the 40 acres and a mule for very, very cheap. Number 4. What you need to know is that it wasn't given away for free, it was sold for a very reasonable, cheap price.
What's the price?
Well, the problem is that slaves have zero money, and zero money is not enough to afford even a cheap thing. So, what you need to know for number 4 is that it was sold for a reasonable price, but that only 15% of freed people could afford this 40 acres and a mule after all.
How many percent?
15. You won't need to know specifically, but you need to know that most people couldn't even afford that. Okay? So it came in handy that this is an arrow supporting. It came in handy that the Freedmen's Bureau, bless you, was there to support the freed people, number 5. The important thing is that the Freedmen's Bureau educated the freedmen, created schools, tutored, taught the adults how to read and write. It's not illegal anymore because they're not slaves anymore, right? Okay. Oh, okay, so before Abraham Lincoln dies, he does manage to get one last piece of legislation out. And it's the 13th Amendment. Now, what was the effect of the Emancipation Proclamation? Bridget?
It said that if the South didn't come back to the North, then all the slaves would be free.
All the slaves would be free, so what was the effect? The slaves were free. The 13th Amendment pretty much legalized that effect. It abolished slavery in America.
How did that necessarily work? Like, did they just get the word out and the slaves could just leave, or did the owners have to
They got the word out, and the word spread quickly, and it was all across the newspapers. And then one slave would realize he was free and could just run away, and he'd run to tell his friends, and the word spread really, really quickly. So it outlawed slavery throughout the country. For the test, you're going to need to know 13th, 14th, and 15th Amendment to know which is which. And how I like to keep track of them is I have these little phrases. No more slavery is 13 letters. I don't know if that helps you, but it helps me. Okay. Okay. Now, Andrew Johnson has this plan for Reconstruction. Number 12. And it's very different than Abraham Lincoln's plan. Remember, he's a Democrat. He's from Tennessee. He thinks that taking away this property from the white people is illegal, and we shouldn't be doing it. So he says, now you have to return that 40 acres and a mule to the original owners. You don't get a refund, sorry. The second part of his plan is that the Freedmen's Bureau is just a waste of money. We're going to demolish that. Andrew Johnson. This is his plan for Reconstruction. So, the 40 acres and a mule was returned. The Freedmen's Bureau is destroyed. And this is America, right? And Andrew Johnson sets up this thing called martial law. There. Oh.
Was this one?
What's the what? Yes. Okay. Anna.
Wait, who was Andrew Johnson? What's 17th?
He was the 17th president. He was a Democrat. We'll talk about some more stuff for him in a second. But for his plan, you want to know that the 40 acres and a mule was given back, the Freedmen's Bureau was demolished, and he created martial law, number 21. I know we're kind of skipping around for a second, but we'll come back. Okay. Martial law is whenever the military goes into a land and controls that area. Okay, so Johnson sends Union troops down into the South to kind of oversee the South and be in charge. Does that answer your question, Persia?
So he's kind
It's like occupying, sure.
So it's kind of like copying what the British did to them.
Exactly.
And what the Nazis did.
There's that. When the military controls. Okay? So, Congress is mainly Republican, and they start realizing that all these Republicans can actually get things done, as opposed to our Congress where they fight about things, right?
Yeah.
They can actually get things done. Oh, this is going to be great. And they're going to pass lots of laws. Awesome. And the first law was the Civil Rights Act of 1866. Where is that? 18. So they passed this law, Civil Rights Act of 1866, and it says that if you were born in America, you are a citizen. This is the first time that natural-born citizen idea came around, right? Republicans are like, right, this is going to be awesome. All the newly freed slaves will be citizens now. Everyone will be happy. But how does the law get passed? Congress writes it, and then the president has to approve it.
Uh-oh.
So what do you think is going to happen?
He's going to
He's going to veto it.
Majority rules.
But then, for the first time in history, Congress uses its power of 2/3 majority to override the veto. So because there were so many Republicans that could work together, they could override the veto and pass the Civil Rights Act anyway. Okay? He did veto it, but Congress overrode that veto.
Rock right now.
Yes. Okay. Guys, don't talk what someone else is talking about. So then, the Congress says, oh, that civil rights great, but let's make it a part of the Constitution. Let's make it an amendment. 14th Amendment. What number is it? Number 9. So the 14th Amendment says pretty much what the Civil Rights Act says. It says USA citizenship. That's my 14-letter remembering for 14th Amendment. Okay? If you were born in the U.S., you are a citizen. Great. party goes in. Okay. Let's see. Oh, we didn't talk about 11. So Abraham Lincoln died. Did I tell you about the train?
Yeah.
How they put Abraham Lincoln's body on a train and rolled it through America, and everybody squished up next to the tracks in black, and they were very sad, and they cried, and the important thing is that they lost hope. What are we going to do without our captain? Oh, Captain, my captain. You guys have heard of that? That's a poem that Walt Whitman wrote for Abraham Lincoln when he died. What's our country going to do without our captain? Our house is sure to divide. The ship, our country is sure to sink. Okay. And sure enough, Johnson starts doing things his own way. Okay. Let's see. So, what are all these people going to do? Andrew Johnson is removing the 40 acres and a mule. How are these people going to make money for Jim?
They're going to protest it, and then they're going to go find jobs in the big city overpopulated.
Okay, that in 100 years they're going to do that. But they don't have enough education to realize the democratic system and we could protest things. They don't have any skills to go out and have other jobs. And transportation and moving your whole family to the big city is very expensive. So they're left with this option called sharecropping. Number 13. Sharecropping is a system where the former masters, the plantation owners, rent land to the slaves. But it's at a very, very high price. So the slaves would give a third or half of their yearly income to the master, plantation owner, as rent. And then the free people would have to use that little bit that was left to pay for everything else. Does that make sense? The master would say, okay, you can live in that tiny shed you've been living in your whole life, but now that you're free, you're going to have to pay rent. Now that you're free, you're going to have to pay rent on those tools that you're using, too. Yeah, you're going to have to pay me for that. Oh, and those clothes that I gave you, yeah, you should probably pay for those. Okay, put that on your tab. So the free people would have to pay. And the important thing is that now they're in so much debt that they're not exactly free. Right? They can't very well leave if they're tied to debt of their former masters. Make sense? Sharecropping? Okay. So, let's see, what should we talk about now? Oh, okay. Congress decides they're almighty and powerful, and they're very excited that they've now passed these laws, even though the president has vetoed them. This is a whistle because they're powerful. And they're really excited to pass some more laws and get some stuff done. And they figure that they might as well just prohibit the powers of the president. So Congress starts passing these laws, number 22. Passing laws to restrict the powers of the president. One example is that they said the president couldn't appoint and couldn't fire anyone from his cabinet anymore. And Johnson was so mad about this. What? I'm the president. I should be allowed to do this. He broke that law and fired his cabinet member anyway. And Congress said, fine, you want to break the laws? What happens when a president breaks the law?
He gets impeached.
He gets impeached. Number 23. So, Congress decides to put the president on trial. Remember that impeachment does not necessarily mean he gets removed from office, but it does mean he gets put on trial. Okay? Congress, they put Johnson on trial. They are looking at his actions. But if they impeach him, who becomes president?
The Speaker of the House.
The Speaker of the House, good. So the Speaker of the House at the time was Benjamin Wade, and he was very untrustworthy. He was unloyal. The Congress thought he was a liar. He was kind of crazy. He was a gambler, and they didn't want to trust the country into his hands, right? So even though they impeached Andrew Johnson and didn't really like him, They decided not to remove him. Okay, so for number 23, you need to know he was put on trial, but he wasn't removed. He stayed as president through the end of the term, 1868. Bridget.
So had Speaker of the House been like really nice and good stuff, even if they kicked out?
Probably. Yeah, probably.
You
Yeah.
need to know the Speaker of the House and thing.
Okay. So then, oh. So then, in 1868, when Abraham Lincoln's term is up, aka Andrew Johnson's term is up, do you think the country's going to re-elect him?
No,
Why?
they don't like it.
He's been in peace. He's broken the laws. Right. So in 1868, Ulysses S. Grant runs for president with the slogan, "Let us have peace." Ironic for the Union General. Let us have peace, man. And the people like that, so they elect him as the 18th president. Let us have peace. Okay, in the meantime, there's all kinds of great. Oh. They elect Ulysses S. Grant, and he's a Republican. But he wins by just a hair, just a small margin. And the Republicans that had all this power in Congress, they're like, oh man, the Democrats are voting again. Oh, what are we going to do? If only there was this large group of people that we could give the vote to, that would vote our way. Gosh, that would be great. Who's the big group of Republicans? What people in America right now can't vote? But if they could, they would vote Republican. The freed people could. So Republicans, number 10, to try to keep their own power, passed the 15th Amendment that says everyone can vote. Yeah. Right. Voting cannot be discriminated against based on your race. Okay, so my little thing is all races can vote. All races can vote. And Susan B. Anthony and Elizabeth Cady Stanton, they're so mad about this. And they stage a huge protest and everybody's angry and they think they're going to make some change happen. And the men say, that's cute, honey, but you can't vote, so what are you really going to do about it? Okay, thanks a lot. Okay, so women try to protest, but nothing comes of it for now. But all races can vote, remember the 15th Amendment. Okay? Right, race means color, okay, not gender. Okay? Persian.
And there's another one too. It's free men can vote.
Okay, sure. So, all people can vote. All men can vote. How are the Southerners going to feel about that? They're not happy. Well, for a second, the voting turns out great. Here's voting. Here's the little poll box, right? All right. And Louisiana is the first state to elect a black governor. 1872. Okay, great. His name's Pinckney. Yeah. You don't need to know his name.
Pinckney?
Pinckney. His first name. It's not a number yet. We're gonna get there. Okay. So listen. Louisiana was the first state to elect a black governor in 1872. Great. You want to guess when the second black governor was elected in America?
19.
Was that Martin Luther King?
1989. The second black governor was elected in Virginia in 1989. More than 100 years. So, the question is, I was alive. The question is, what happened in between that time to prevent these black people from voting and from gaining office? Okay, let's talk about it. Remember social structure? I'm talking about social structure at length. I'm drawing social structure today as a staircase. Okay, with at the top we've got the president and the congressman, and at the bottom maybe the little sharecroppers with lots of debt.
That's so
Okay.
sad.
you move up. Social phenomena. You're close, Kennedy. Social
I want to say media, but it's not that.
mobility. It means you move, okay? All that. Okay. Well, the South starts creating all these laws. Number 17? Oh, sorry, 16. We'll get to Jim Crow.
Black codes.
They start creating all these laws, number 16, black codes. And the purpose was to take away rights from black people. To get them stuck down here, way in the bottom of the social structure, so they can't grow up and accomplish things. So they can't be part of the government or have any control. Does that make sense? Okay. Jim Crow, number 17, was a fictitious character. Somebody that they would play in plays and on cartoons. Like Uncle Tom or Uncle Sam, you know, he's fictional, but everybody knows of him. Okay, Jim Crow would have been the same way, but he was like this, made fun of, really dumb, freed person, and all the white people would make fun of him. Okay, so black codes are often named Jim Crow laws after Jim Crow. Does that make sense? Okay.
Wait, so the name Jim Crow?
Is a pretend cartoon character, pretty much.
But what if there's an actual black man?
I'm sure there is. It's a very pretty common name, but you get the point. Okay. So what else would they do? Let's see. Hi. Okay. Now we're trying to prevent all the black people from voting, right? So, have you ever heard the phrase "jumping through hoops"?
Yes.
Okay.
Tons of times.
What? Okay. Number 18, disenfranchisement. This is just the overall definition, not A. Okay. Disenfranchisement means losing your rights, really losing the right to vote or having that right taken away. Okay, so the Southerners are disenfranchising the free black men by taking away their right to vote. Now they had to be kind of sneaky about it. You can't just say black people couldn't vote because that goes against their new rights. But you could say, oh, we only want smart people to vote in our state. So before you vote, you have to take a literacy test. What's literacy? Literature, how you speak, right? Reading and writing. Okay. So you'd have to take this test, and it would be like a huge packet. You'd walk in the room, and the proctor would plop down the packets and say, okay, 10 minutes, go. And it was very tricky. They purposely tried to trip you up and get it wrong. And remember, black people haven't had a chance to read or write or learn these things yet in our history. No, everybody had to take it. So what might be an unintended consequence? They want only the black people to fail this test, but, Angie?
They let the white people, they just like rig it. And
It's
let
so
them-
hard, the white people might fail it too, right? So, like she said, they rig it. The proctor has final say. So I could just say, sure, you pass, even if you only answered one question. Does that make sense? Okay?
Didn't you say everyone passed?
Well, yes, pretty much. But then some people started studying and trying really hard and passing and making a big stink out of it. There's no way, this is illegal, I'm going to sue you, I passed. They said, oh, that's fine, you passed the literacy test, but now you have to also, everyone also has to pay a poll tax. The poll is where you go to vote, right? Voting? No. So a poll tax means when you go to vote, you pay, right? How is that going to prevent black people from voting, Sarah?
They don't have any money.
They don't have any money. But unintended consequence, most people in the South don't have money. Their economy is ruined, right? So, if somehow you pass the literacy test and could pay the poll tax, you can vote, but most people couldn't. So how are they going to let white people vote anyway? This is like the last hoop is on fire, you know? called the grandfather clause. And it was kind of a stipulation. It said, well, even if you failed the test and can't afford the poll tax, if your grandfather could vote, so can you.
Was that with a W or with a U?
CLAUSE.
I would put a W for the whole thing.
No. Okay, so if your grandfather could vote, so could you. How does that keep black people out?
Their grandfather.
They couldn't vote.
Their grandfathers were slaves. And all the white people's grandfathers probably could vote. Okay? So even the really determined freed people who studied and learned and saved up and got the poll tax money because they wanted to vote and they wanted their voice to be heard were still stifled with the grandfather clause.
But I thought all slaves were
There's no more slavery.
no, when the grandfathers were free.
Well, at first, before those freed people could have children,
Oh.
does that make sense? The first generation couldn't vote.
And even then, Anna,
Oh, I
if they
get it.
had grandpas, they still couldn't vote because their grandpas couldn't vote because their grandpas couldn't vote.
But she brings up a good point because listen, well, what happens a couple years down the line when those first freed people struggle and pass the literacy test and somehow get through and pay the poll tax and they get to vote? Once one black person gets to vote, according to the grandfather clause, all of his descendants, okay? So we've got to do something about that.
People are like teenagers. Never
Like, are those onions? Are those potatoes?
They're not
onions.
They're vegetables in my class. You got no. This is the KKK number 14.
Oh.
Number 14, I think. Yes. Somebody look. Yes. Now, listen. The KKK was this group. They were originally called the White League because they like white people, and they don't like anyone that's different than them. Okay? They don't like Democrats, even if they are white. They certainly don't like people of any other color. They don't like immigrants. And they really don't like those Catholics. Sure, now you get offended. All this hate happens.
I'm not
Okay.
Catholic, so I'm fine.
I'm just saying. They were obviously a hate group and they didn't like lots of people and they would practice terrorism and violence against the people that they didn't like. Now, lynching, number 15, means hanging, and it was often very public. The KKK would capture someone they didn't like and hang them in a public spot to kind of be an example to other people. Better not go around being Catholic around here, because here's what happens to us. They wore those scary hoods. That's why they look like onions in my picture. Okay?
Like it was Dean's Christmas.
Right. Has anyone seen Forrest Gump?
Yes.
Remember how he says, I was named after General Nathan Bedford Forrest. Mama says that's to remind us we all do things that just don't make no sense. Right? That guy, Nathan Bedford Forrest, was actually the founder of the KKK. Yeah, crazy, right?
Was it one of the presidents?
I'm sure.
Yeah.
The KKK still exists, but now it's a hate group. You have the right in America to be in whatever club you want to, even if it's a mean club.
Oh yeah, I remember. the
You
first
don't have the right to
season
kill
with that.
people, though, right? And before it was considered a hate organization, the KKK ran around killing, burning, hanging, lynching, torturing whoever they didn't like. In Colfax, Louisiana in 1872, the KKK surrounded a whole big group of people they didn't like and murdered over 150 people were killed. Yes, the pointy heads. And guess how many went to jail after that?
Zero.
Zero. Big fat zero. Why? Sarah?
Because it wasn't illegal.
Murder was illegal.
Oh.
But it was a club.
Well,
Because they were secret.
no one knew who they were. You're right. In these small towns, no one probably knows who the murderer mean people are. No one probably knows.
But I'm on the Brute Squad.
I called the Brute Squad. You are the Brute Squad. Okay. No, in a small town, who do you think the KKK people might be that aren't going to get in trouble? What about the police, the government, the judge, the rich guy. If all of your law enforcement officials are on the KKK, who are you going to call when all this goes down? Yes, every class has said that so far. All the Ghostbusters, I get it.
Yeah,
Okay?
that's what I said.
But really, that's why they don't get punished. And that's why this violence and terrorism continues. Make sense? Sarah? Ladies? Okay, Kennedy. Lynching is
Hanging in
hanging,
public.
In public.
and the KKK did it often.
When did hanging
We have 3 left. Oh, okay. Also happening is now we talked about how listen, we've talked about how the Southern economy is totally ruined after the March to the Sea, right? Well, whenever there's a bad economy, people rush in to make a quick dollar, right? Carpetbaggers are what, 19? Carpetbaggers. They're called that because they pack their goods into a little bag made of carpet. They're from the north, and they go down to the south to try to make money quickly. For instance, they would say, here I have some magical cotton seeds that will grow even though your farm's been burned. Only $2,000 a piece. That's a, they're kind of like con men, sure. Okay. Gypsies, if you will. Ladies, shh. Okay. On the other hand, you've got scalawags. See, he's like Slooney with his little heart in his eyeballs. Okay. He's from the south, but he loves the north. His love is pointed this way. He loves the north, he loves the union, he wants the country to get back together, which sounds like a fine thing, but the Southerners say, you scalawag, you're going against your Southern pride and honor and loving those Yankees. Sarah.
Okay, I remember. If the KKK didn't like Catholics, did they ever come to like Sweden for like Hindu?
No, because they're little children, you know, and nuns. Right.
You know,
And
like,
the KKK probably had other things to deal with.
But they're ruthless killers.
They are ruthless killers, but they probably would rather ruthless kill some of the other people on the first on their list that can vote. Does that make sense? Right. The women can't vote. We don't care about that anyway.
Hey.
That's true. Okay. Okay. Carpetbaggers and scalawags. Are we happy with those?
Yes.
Okay.
Scalawags is the people in South that love the North.
Love the North.
Wait, did the North criticize it or the South?
The South did. How dare you love those Yankees, ladies? Come on. How dare you love those Yankees? They're from the South. Get it together. Yeah. Okay. We just have Mason-Dixon line. This is a good one. Anyone ever heard of the Mason-Dixon line?
Yes.
Okay. In the 1760s, 2 guys were commissioned to go and map out the territory between Pennsylvania and Maryland. Okay, Charles Mason and Jeremiah Dixon. Okay, 25. Thank you. And then Pennsylvania abolished slavery, so people started learning that north of the Mason-Dixon line, slavery is outlawed. That's the real Mason-Dixon line. What's more important is the imaginary Mason-Dixon line. Somehow during the Civil War, people started referring to the Mason-Dixon line as this imaginary line that separates the North and South. Does that make sense? There's no slavery north of the Mason-Dixon line. Okay, that's also why the South is sometimes called Dixie, or Dixieland.
I've heard of that.
Get it? Okay, Dixon, get Dixie, get it?
Yeah, I get it.
Let's see what else is happening. One, that people during the Civil War thought it was an imaginary line that divided the North and the South. Bless you. Now, speaking of Jim Crow and black codes and things that are happening. In the South, part of what they would do is segregation. 29.
Mhm.
Uh-huh. Okay. Part of what they would do is segregation, which means separating. And for our purposes, it's separating based on race. You could say based on gender, like our school is segregated, boys and girls, different areas, right? But as far as the South, during Reconstruction, it was segregated based on race. So you'd have the white people only water fountain, and the colored people only water fountain. Segregated train cars, segregated schools, segregated everything. Well, this fellow named Homer Plessy gets on a streetcar in New Orleans, and he's tired after this long day, and the black-only car is full, so he sits in the white-only car. So he thinks, I'm a citizen, I have rights, right? I can do whatever I want. He sits in the car, and the conductor freaks out, kicks him off the train, and Homer Plessy is angry. So he sues, and it goes to the Louisiana Supreme Court, and they're battling over it, and they can't decide, so it goes to the United States Supreme Court, number 30. So Plessy versus Ferguson is the Supreme Court decision that said, ooh, sorry, Plessy, segregation is okay. It legalized segregation. It said things can be separate as long as they're equal. Okay, separate but equal is the big catchphrase for that one. It's a Supreme Court case that legalized segregation. It said things could be separate as long as they were equal. But of course, just a second, Mary. But of course, a consequence of this was not as it was intended. Things were actually not equal. The white kids could walk to school a block from their house, have a new shiny building with brand new textbooks and the teachers who loved them, and then the black kids had to walk 3 miles away to the black people's school with the roof caving in and the hand-me-down textbooks, and nobody wanted to teach them, and they didn't have lunch. Okay, so it was separate, all right, but it wasn't equal. Addie.
You said it legalized segregation?
Sure. Persian.
So the Plessy versus Ferguson thing is kind of like Rosa Parks.
Rosa Parks will come along fighting that same battle. Yeah.
And then the number 29 thing with the kids, and how they have such nice schools, it's kind of like Ruby Bridges.
Exactly, Ruby Bridges. Exactly. We'll get there too. We'll get there next time. Okay. Good so far? Okay. Is all we have left 26, 27, and 28?
Yes.
Okay, so Ulysses S. Grant serves out his presidency and everybody's happy. And then, in 1876, Ulysses S. Grant has already served his 2 terms, can't run again, so there's 2 people running. Samuel L. Tilden versus the Bearded Wonder. Sorry. No, Rutherford B. Hayes. You don't need to know Samuel Tilden's name, but you do need to know Rutherford B. Hayes' name because he's number 27. Rutherford. So, Rutherford is the Republican. Samuel is the Democrat. And so they vote, and the popular vote comes back, and Rutherford B. Hayes gets about 4 million votes. And Samuel L. Tilden gets about 4.3 million votes. But college, what's college? Electoral college. But Louisiana, Florida, and Oklahoma, their electoral colleges are undecided, and the states can't decide where those votes should go. So what happens if the electoral college can't decide who the president needs to be? Who gets to decide? Congress. Good. Great. So now Congress is in charge of deciding who the president is going to be. And who do you think they're going to pick? The Republican, Rutherford B. Hayes. Yeah. And the South is just going to be happy about that? No. I don't think so. The South said, no way, we're going to secede. We're going to secede again, and we're going to start a war again. Well, the North, yeah, we'll do it again. The North had just gone through, ladies. They had just gone through a recession. 26? Like, yo, what's a recession? No, it's kind of like a depression. It means that the economy goes down. People are poorer.
The Great Depression?
No, not yet.
Oh,
Next year. Okay. So, there's a recession. And people in the north are poorer. And when people are poorer, they're less likely to give their money to somebody else. Right? So the northerners, what you need to know for number 26, are more focused on spending money on themselves. They don't really feel like caring about or spending money on the south anymore. Aren't those free people transitioned by now? You know? It's been 10 years. Okay? So back to this election. The recession has just happened. Rutherford B. Hayes goes against Samuel L. Tilden. And the Congress says, Rutherford B. Hayes is going to win. And the South says, I don't think so. We'll secede again. We'll fight another war. But the North is like, oh, we can't afford another war. We just went through this recession. Tell you what, let's make a compromise. How about that? 20 what? 28? 28. Compromise of 1877. It's when the Congress gets together and they make this little committee of Republicans and Democrats, and they try to figure out who's going to be president. So they say, all right, the first part of our compromise is that Rutherford B. Hayes gets to be the 19th president. Great. But what's in it for the South? Well, the South says, firstly, you've got to end this martial law. Bring those troops out of here. Okay? And we want a transcontinental railroad, Jefferson Davis style. So through Texas. Right? Republicans said, is that enough? Is that very good? And the South said, well, and you should probably just leave us alone and let us govern our own states as we know best. Well, of course, the North, they've just had a recession, they're focused on themselves, and they said, yeah, that's cool, that's fine. And Reconstruction is over! Everything's better, we made a compromise. Okay? Great! So, now that Reconstruction is over, what's the situation with sectionalism? Do you think it's gotten better? Great, we've reconstructed the nation. Sectionalism is over.
The South is
No, the South is like, just leave us alone. Okay, we're not gonna
Right. They're mad. Their economy's ruined. The only thing they've been left with is the right to hate those Yankees, right? And the Northerners are even worse. They think the Southerners did it on purpose. They were treasonous. They need to be punished. Fine, we'll just leave you alone, right? So you need to make a note, maybe next to 1 and 2, about sectionalism and how it's gotten even worse, even though Reconstruction is now technically over. Okay? Questions or comments or concerns about that? Sarah, will you stop the thing? Angie.
So I was
Hi guys.